Hello, I'm Ivy. I'm heading to Skinwalker Ranch to uncover the secrets buried beneath its legends and open a file that was never meant to be found.
On October 14, 1958, a solitary truck driver on Route 66 heard a frantic scratching against his passenger window while traveling at 70 miles per hour. I have opened this file more times than I care to admit, and something about the silence that followed still refuses to settle in the dark. What makes a seasoned traveler abandon his rig in the middle of a Navajo highway and run into the cold desert night? I have spent centuries gathering the things people were desperate to leave behind. My fingers remember the chill of old parchment and the smell of dry sage burnt down to ash. But some files do not belong in a neat little drawer. They cling to the edges of the desk, waiting for someone foolish enough to read them out loud. Long before the modern asphalt carved up the red earth, the Dene people understood the absolute fragility of the world. They knew that the land is old and that harmony is a delicate glass thread. In traditional Navajo teachings, that balance is known as hojo. To disrupt it requires a severe, deliberate turning away from the path of the people. That is where the Yenaldlooshii begins. The name itself translates to, by means of it, he goes on all fours. It is not a cryptid born of the wild. It is a human practitioner of dark arts who traded away their humanity for the ability to wear the pelt of a wolf, a coyote, or a bear. Outsiders always want a neat little monster feature. They want a creature they can check off a list. But the locals know better. You do not hunt a Yenaldlooshii. In many traditional communities, even speaking its name outside of winter can invite an unwanted shadow to your door. I can feel the ink on this page growing colder as I say it. There is a reason the elders keep their voices low when the winter winds begin to rattle the roof timbers. The transformation requires an unthinkable price. A true practitioner crosses a terrible threshold, often involving the loss of a close family member to seal the pact. Once that line is crossed, they slip into an animal skin under the cover of a moonless night. They do not become the animal entirely. They borrow its shape, its speed, and its hunger. And worse still, they retain a twisted human malice behind those amber eyes. Consider the reports that trickled out of the reservation borders through the middle of the 20th century. Ranchers finding their livestock drained of blood, not by ordinary predators, but by something that left impossibly neat surgical incisions. Drivers reporting coyotes running alongside their automobiles at blinding speeds, turning their heads with an unnatural human curiosity before vanishing into the arroyos. The police reports from the time are frustratingly dry. They speak of missing livestock, broken fences, and strange footprints that end abruptly in the dust where no road exists. Yet the most chilling detail is never the speed or the shape. It is the sound. Witnesses often describe hearing a voice call out from the dark in the familiar tone of a missing relative, begging to be let inside. If you open the door, the elders say, you are already gone. The entity does not want to talk. It wants to test your curiosity, to see how far you will lean into the dark before you realize you are looking at a stranger. I have turned these testimonies over in my mind until my own thoughts began to blur. The skepticism comes easy at first. We want to believe that the world is entirely known, mapped, and fenced in. We want to believe that a human being cannot simply put on a pelt and step outside the laws of nature. Yet the police reports do not explain why the sheep were found piled in perfect circles, untouched by scavengers. They do not explain why the tracks simply stopped in the middle of solid rock. and they certainly do not explain why the drivers who survived the encounter refused to speak about what they saw for the rest of their lives. The boundary between our world and the older, hungrier world is thinner than we pretend. It only takes a single misstep on a lonely road to find out. The parchment in my hands is trembling just a fraction now. There is something else tucked into the back of this file, a handwritten margin note from a tribal liaison in 1974 that was never entered into the official state record.
That margin note describes a night when the local dogs refused to bark. Not a single sound came from the kennels for 6 hours straight, as if every living animal within 10 miles had collectively held its breath. We like to pretend that modernization leaves no room for ancient things. We pave the desert with asphalt, string high-voltage lines across the mesas, and put neon lights on every corner, as if brightness alone could sterilize the dark. Yet the stories have simply migrated alongside us. They follow the interstate highways. They hide in the static of local radio stations when you drive too far past the city limits. Modern encounters rarely sound like ancient myths. They sound like modern isolation. A trucker stranded with engine trouble on a stretch of interstate where cell service dies entirely. A hiker taking a shortcut through remote territory who notices the woods have gone entirely silent. The transition from traditional Navajo folklore to modern urban legend is fascinating and deeply misunderstood. Outsiders often try to commercialize it, turning sacred taboos into Hollywood monster movies with fast-moving creatures and cheap jump scares. They miss the quiet dread of the reality. The real fear was never about a beast jumping out from behind a tree. It was about the terrifying realization that your neighbor, the quiet person you have known for years, might be walking the ridges at night, wearing something that does not belong to them. The modern reports share a common thread with the old oral histories, the absolute wrongness of the creature's movement. A wolf does not lope with the awkward, joint-cracking gait of a man trying to force his limbs into a smaller mold. A coyote does not stop beneath a streetlight and stare at you with an expression of cold, human recognition. When you read through the decades of collected files, a pattern begins to emerge. The sightings cluster around times of transition, changes in the weather, economic desperation, or the sudden encroachment of industrial development into untouched lands. It's almost as if the entities feed on the friction between the old world and the new. I've read this file 100 times, and my honest read is this: the physical impossibility of the transformation is precisely what protects the secret. Skeptics point to mass hysteria, the tricks of moonlight on desert brush, and the loneliness of the long-distance highway, and for ordinary coyotes, they are entirely right. But the skeptics always stumble when they have to explain the silence. They cannot explain why every animal within miles goes quiet before the scratching starts. I lean toward the belief that something ancient and deeply human walks those ridges, something that uses the shape of an animal to hide what it truly became. So, tell me, knowing what you know about the quiet places at the edge of the map, do you think the Yenaldlooshii is merely a psychological ghost born of desert isolation, or something that never stopped watching the reservation borders? Leave your theory below. I read every single one, and I am quite curious which side of the divide you find yourself standing on. Because as I fold this particular file away
and listen to the floorboards settling in the dark outside my study, I realize the scratching on the window didn't stop when I turned the page. It's just getting louder.